In 1961, Josef Koudelka began visiting the settlements of Romani peoples, a group commonly referred to as gypsies. A young Czech engineer with an East German camera and a slow 25mm lens, Koudelka traveled through Slovakia, Spain, and France over the next decade, documenting lives rarely seen by the outside world. His camera was not a top-of-the-line rangefinder, but it served as a window into the communities living at the margins of society. The equipment Koudelka used was a choice born of necessity. In Eastern Europe of the 1960s, a Leica was an unattainable luxury, especially for a young man fresh out of university. Koudelka worked with what he could afford, his modest tools capturing the gypsies and later the Soviet invasion of Prague.
Před budovou ústředního výboru strany padají první výstřely. Posádka obrněnce s číslem 002 má stáda Národního muzea zůstane dlouhou památkou na srpnovou noc, na bratrskou pomoc. By the early 1970s, when Henri Cartier-Bresson helped him acquire his first Leica cameras, Koudelka had finished his work on the gypsies and moved on to other projects. In an interview for the New York Times, Koudelka said this about his tools. "When I understood that I don't need any more wide-angle lens photos, that, on the contrary, there's a repetition coming, I bought two Leicas and started to use a 35mm lens and a 50mm lens. I knew that the techniques would change the vision if you changed the technique." I think it is also the training from Czechoslovakia that I appreciate the freedom. You want to keep this feeling of freedom and you want to go further, so you break the rule, you destroy the house, and you start again. When Koudelka let go of the 25mm lens, he abandoned his old limitations and constraints. And then what did he do? He imposed a new limitation and a new set of constraints on himself by deciding to work exclusively with the new tools. What is interesting here is not so much his gear. It is that he discusses freedom in the context of imposing rules and restrictions. It was as if he knew limitations and constraints were the path to take in order to grow as a photographer. He knew he would thrive working within boundaries, no endless choices, no second guessing, just focusing on the work itself. One East German camera, one film stock, and a slow and wide 25mm lens. Think about today's photographers. They get lost in decisions. Which film stocks and film simulations do I use? Which camera bodies? Which lenses? All these choices sound great, but I wonder if the very opportunity of choice, the luxury of choice, actually stifles creativity. This is, after all, the metaphor of the gilded cage, something that appears nice but actually restricts or limits our freedom. In other words, having fewer choices and options would be somehow liberating. Having less is more, after all. It sounds paradoxical, but maybe there's some truth in it. So what is that one simple rule to improve your photography? Well, the rule is to give yourself rules, to give yourself limitations. The idea is simple. Creativity thrives within boundaries. Unlimited options often lead to creative stagnation. When we're faced with infinite possibilities, we seem to spend more time contemplating potentials than actually creating. Think about it. When we have everything available, we often do nothing. But give someone a limited toolkit, a tight deadline, or a narrow focus, and suddenly they're making things happen. Constraints, in other words, aren't prisons, they're launching pads. We spoke of Koudelka's limitations in terms of camera gear, but limitations and rules can take on many forms in creative work. You can set topical constraints like committing to a specific subject or exploring a single theme or single topic. You can set temporal, time constraints by setting a window of time or imposing a deadline on yourself. Or you can just set arbitrary rules like giving yourself a daily challenge. This is what I did, after all, when I went to Bolivia. I had a list of rules, one of which was having to take at least one street portrait every day. I wasn't comfortable taking portraits before then, but that was the whole point, right? To get out of my comfort zone, to push myself, and to grow.
I'm thinking about this because I'm considering imposing a new set of boundaries and a new set of rules on myself in the new year. I'm comfortable using a 50mm lens, but a 50mm lens, or any lens for that matter, dictates how you see the world and how you interact with it. This was one of Koudelka's points. So I'm thinking about going wide and shooting exclusively with a 24 to a 28mm lens for at least a year. The reason is because I want to see the world differently and I want to improve my craft. If you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that I like setting rules for myself because I think they're helpful in creative work. Limitations aren't obstacles, they're opportunities. The goal isn't to torture yourself here, it's to force yourself to focus, to eliminate noise and the trap of comfort. This is how we become better.